Good day to you and welcome to the very first Coffee Uche Okeke, a series of conversations that we'll be having throughout August with various guests who are familiar with the work of, the life of, the man, the work, the legacy of the late Christopher Uche Okeke. So my name is Tamzin Lovell. I'm the host of this series. I am the founder and CEO of Art Fundi, and it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome Salma Uche Okeke, daughter of the late Uche Okeke, in conversation with me today and to kick off this series. Welcome, Salma. Welcome all our guests that are listening in. And we are so happy to have you here today to start off this conversation.
Hello, good afternoon. Tamzin. Can you hear?
Lovely. Yes, perfectly. Isn't it lovely that I can sit here in Cape Town and other people in other parts of the world with us, and you in Nigeria, and we can all be chatting live.
It's really amazing how global the world is right now. Basically, it's a little village. And it's exciting the possibilities with all that.
Yes, it is. Just thinking of people that I work with on a regular basis, that they're in so many different time zones. We have Lizanne, who's in Bali, and had somebody mailing me the other day asking whether I was coping with the heat. Because the hot summer in the USA, I forgot that I was in a winter time. I'm sitting with a big scarf on my neck, reading her email and laughing.
And that's really amazing, because when we started this work with Ijeoma, we were in different time zones.
Yes.
South Africa, Johannesburg, and at some point she was in New York, USA, and all the time I was in Nigeria. And technology was what kept everything together. We did so much online.
It's crazy. When I think back to when this is going to age me a lot, but I think back to high school, and I remember our school getting its first computer for the school. They got 3 computers, and I was the year before the final year, which in South Africa they called it Standard 9, and they deemed us to be too old to learn this new thing called a computer. They didn't bother with us. And so back that was just within my lifetime and career and beginnings of my career, where people still thought computers were not going to be. Nobody had an idea of what it would become. Amazing.
Exactly. And talking about those computers, my dad was very eager to get one. He had this cousin of his that was working with the UN and was in some part of Africa, and he requested for a desktop from him, and guess what he did? He was changing his, and so he sent Dad his old one. He got a new one and he sent him the one he used to use, and my dad was all excited. I can't remember him actually going on the desktop, but he wanted to quickly jump on board. And that reminds me also of my uncle in New York, who has done so much work with my dad. He's over 80 now and still alive and lives in New York, and he had to type everything, that kind of thing, and so he had to always go on his PC and do work. It must have been the desktop at that time, and so even now he prefers send me an email. He still doesn't do the smartphone. Quite interesting. Yeah.
But your dad, the esteemed Professor Uche Okeke, he was a real leader, and he seemed to be so ahead of his time with whatever was going on in his generation all the time. So I think he would have responded quite well to current technology. What do you think he would have thought of us being in Discord talking about him and going to be doing collaborations with generative AI and NFTs?
Oh wow! It really blows my mind to that he would have been. I mean, this is the man I was telling you that when the computer first came on board, he had to get someone to quickly get him one and all that. And I try to wrap my head around, how he would have felt about being able to have a more global network. He already did that, but a lot of that had to do with, putting things in writing and putting them in journals and, all kinds of, getting acquainted with all kinds of institutions across the world, across the globe. But imagine he could have been sitting in one place and be reaching out much further than he ever did. Um, I think he would have really been completely blown away. And even if, now he would have been in his late 80s, but I can imagine him still sitting at his desk and trying to figure out what to do with tech, or trying to get younger, should I say, followers to do more of it. He would have been really excited, I know for sure.
I'm sure you're absolutely right. He was he was such a multifaceted man, a creator, a leader, a teacher, a mentor, and he had followings. He had a fellowship, actually. I was chatting to one of his collaborators the other day, Professor Bruce Onabakper, and he sort of speaks so proudly of him as a philosopher and as so much more than just an artist. And
that was,
and I think his range. He has those elders that were his colleagues in the day and collaborated with him, and he shared so much with that group, and he was such a generous man. But I think even the younger generation today, can you tell us a bit about how the younger generation view him and how he's influenced so many of them?
Well, starting from his colleagues, he would have been taken to be the philosopher amongst them, in the sense that he came up with those ideas and he drove them and he made sure that he got people on board, and not like any kind of coercion or anything like that. It would be like getting them to become part and parcel of it, take ownership and run with it also with their own initiative. So starting from that point, he was able to use the University of Nigeria and Nsukka as a full lab, to build his followership, with his concept of holism, as it's called, basically today. But the exciting thing, and if you spoke to his students, it's the methodology of his passing his ideas. It was more like getting people to be aware of the possibilities based on their own ideas and their own backgrounds, their own experiences of life, and how to leverage the idea. And so everybody made that idea their own, and that's how it has passed down from generation to generation. And not everybody has had the direct link with him, but it still keeps going on because his followers are still busy practicing. And because they were able to own the philosophy, because they were able to own the idea, the concept, they were able to make it their own. And so they are able to pay it forward, so to speak. And that is how it is trickling down to more and more generations of people, with everybody finding how it resonates to them.
I think that's what makes the living legacy possible. But we'll come to that a little bit later. I want to just keep chatting about him and him as the man. What was he like? I want to hear from you what he was like as a father.
Mm-hmm. He was, well, everybody would say he was gentle, physically, and quite humorous. He was always that person to do a bit of a banter. Sometimes we thought it wasn't even that funny, but I mean, he definitely loved his own jokes, you know. So he loved to talk with people generally, not just about art and culture, and he just loved to relate with people. And he was a bit of a bit of a quiet person, but not that kind of brooding artist. Mm-mm. He tried to get to know people, and he tried to encourage them towards uh, what they thought they wanted. Maybe help them to find out what they were best fitted for. Basically, it may not be in the art. And for us as kids, he brought us up to take ownership of our lives. He wasn't that kind of dad that presented you or pampered you in the sense of taking all decisions for you and all that. No, he left us to take our decisions, but then he made it very clear that the consequences of our decisions were ours also to take. So we had that freedom to be bold, but then we had to be ready also to take whatever consequence came with it. He tried to talk with us about things, and just find out what were our views. What did we? I mean, if you wanted to do something, he would like to know why do you want to do that. And it was quite interesting growing up with him. I don't think he really knew how to treat children like children. I think he treated them a bit like adults. I think so. But we felt it was good for us in the sense that it gave us that much more freedom to think through our things and to take ownership of our decisions and our lives. And I think it prepared us for whatever would come in the future.
Did you have a lot of people coming to visit in the house? It must have been an interesting environment because he had a lot of friends. He was very open to lots of community, and he had so many interests in culture and in philosophy and music and poetry and all sorts of things. He must have had interesting friends that came to visit, I would imagine.
It was a very interesting period growing up with him, around him. He traveled quite a lot, but then again, he was there. And while he was there were all kinds of the flurry of activity. I mean, even as a child, you could feel the intensity of him trying to do as much as he was possible. But there wasn't that feeling that it was all about him. It was always about community. There were always people coming and going from all over the world. He did that stint in Germany and he kept the connection. They were always visiting, coming to spend some time in Nigeria over and over again, and we met a whole lot of people. It was the kind of multicultural environment growing up with him, with different people from different parts of Nigeria, different parts of Africa, and different parts of the world coming and going. And while we were in the university environment also, there were these exchange programs that also happened, and he was very much instrumental to drawing in some people also from different parts of the world who came around. And, there were a lot of exhibitions happening, a lot of things like theater. As a young person, we met all those people. We got a feel of everything. Yeah, and that is how come at the end of the day, when I was to go into college, I just wanted to do something that was that gave me a kind of exposure to the different arts, because that is what I had grown up in, basically, and I didn't even know what I wanted to specialize in.
I imagine it must have been wonderful. I had a very quiet childhood by comparison with an engineer father and an introvert. So I'm a little jealous. But what was his dream for art and artists in Nigeria?
His dream went further than Nigeria, really. But for Nigeria, he wanted because when he was in the early stages of his career, art was not yet it wasn't among those professions that people would consider okay for their children to go into. I remember that my grandma had expected him to go into such professions as medicine, law, those kinds of professions. And he was a well-rounded student, so he could have gone into anything. But this is what he chose. So I know that beneath everything, he would have also wanted people to be able to build careers in the arts, if the soul wished, without having to maybe go into some other profession because it was more prestigious, and that involved creating the enabling environment for the artists that were to follow, and spent himself and his contemporaries spent quite some time trying to put that in place. And of course, he was the arrowhead for that. So I would say that his dream would have been for Nigeria to enable everybody that wanted to go into the arts to have that environment, to have the mentorship that they required to be able to excel without having to give up their interests. I think so.
And he did many things towards that over a long period of time, and he ultimately launched the S1E1 Institute. Can you tell us a bit about his ideas for that and how he started it and how it's going to become part of what you continue in the legacy?
The S1E1 Institute was actually started quite early in his career. I think probably he'd seen such models in Europe, and he was a very intelligent man with a very high IQ. And I think he realized very early, because he started this very early, he realized pretty early that if he wanted to bequeath something to humanity, it had to go further than just what he would produce himself. It wouldn't be just as simple as just the works he does, because going further than his works was his philosophy, and that was very important. That's really what he wanted to leave behind. And he knew that to get that institutionalized was the best way to ensure that he left behind a sustainable and living legacy. And so that was how S1E1 Institute was born. And he started collecting, building his archives, collecting all kinds of things you can imagine, not just artworks, even stats, all kinds of things. There's nothing he didn't have in there, from all over the world. And then also he was building up his own personal collection that is of his own works. So he has, for the S1E1 Institute, he had the concept of having the archives, having the documentation center, as they called it then, the library, and the gallery, a gallery of artworks that was also split in two, his own works and other people's works that he collected. So you can see that the S1E1 Institute was meant to be larger than him right from the start.
And what was he sort of influenced by, apart from the early tradition and his philosophy of natural synthesis? He was surrounding himself with other artists and writers and making himself sort of absorb and reading prolifically and absorbing ideas.
I think he must have been also very much influenced by the time. At that period, it was a kind of renaissance of types. In Africa, for instance,
we went through the liberation,
coming out of liberation, coming out of colonization. In Nigeria, colonization was a different thing for us altogether. It really basically exposed us to new ways of doing things, new ways of, of thinking. It exposed us to education, and that was a bedrock of many things for him. The education, and coming back now to interrogate his own environment and his own background, and then see where he can link it up.
And many of those influences come into his art. So he, as we're beginning to work with this archive and look through it and get into the work, we're seeing these kind of different types of projects and different types of works. He worked with sculpture and painting and printmaking, but he also worked with different themes. He explored those political themes. He explored portraiture. He's obviously very interested in people. So those sort of mediums, psychological, spiritual levels that he worked at, was that a struggle for him to was he trying to work through lots of things, or was it just how big his mind was, in a way, just embracing all of those different techniques and mediums?
It was how big his mind was, really, but his mind really was big. But it was also the experiences he encountered along the way. And luckily, he was able to launch his career quite early as a pretty much a young man. And, so he was growing at the same time. He was getting more exposed to things. For instance, he went to Germany, and he was exposed to the technique of stained glass. All those things came to bear, and then the religious beat was always there. He was a Catholic, and as a young boy from a good Catholic home, he would have been involved in mass serving and all that at an earlier stage. And so you would see those themes that had to do with religion also. Some of them were commissioned works as well, so he kept evolving. His mind was growing and evolving, and the world around him was growing and evolving, and he had made met those contemporaries in college, and they already were walking in that direction together. And of course, the landscape of Renaissance and liberation that was all around. I think it was a time when everybody wanted to do something meaningful, wanted to leave something back behind somehow. Some more than others, maybe, but a whole lot of people were moving in that same kind of direction, I think.
He was so prolific. If you look on the website, on his About page, and you look at his CV, so many exhibitions, books, great works, acquisitions in museums. He must have been, as you said, he started early. He got acceptance and he got his career started very early, and you can see that because he's done just so much work. It's quite remarkable.
He was very strategic about his career. I remember having discussed with him. I remember him telling me some of the first exhibitions he had. They would make sure that these exhibitions were documented, and there were write-ups on the exhibitions, and even sometimes they would get some people to sort of write it up specifically, just to provide that springboard for the exposure and all that. They didn't leave anything. He didn't leave anything to chance. He was big on documentation, and documentation is very important, but a lot of people don't realize it at the early stages of their careers.
No, you don't. And that's really good advice that I'm sure younger artists today could also benefit from, because I think sometimes there's a lot of hope and things. Artists are really excited and they get an exhibition and they hope for the things. And what you're saying is that your dad pre-planned those things, that he didn't just hope on chance, he made things happen.
Yes. He pre-planned because for him, he had the bigger picture. It wasn't about making a work and having it sold. No. In fact, in his lifetime, he didn't sell his works as such. He didn't. He knew that he wanted to live, he wanted to build the institute. And so he knew that he wanted works there, some of his works there. I mean, that would be the importance of his works in the long run. So, of course, he had to, in those days, he had a paid job, so he wasn't depending on selling art to survive. And being that he was pretty much intelligent and could apply for grants, he was able to do such things. And because of his strategy, he was able to make himself visible, create that visibility for himself, and he followed through with those steps, basically so that he could, make sure that he is building for posterity, more or less. So it wasn't. So he didn't clutter his mind with producing work. If you check his history, you would see that at some point, at the beginning and towards the end, before he felt like he created works, in between was a whole lot of stuff done towards art and culture, which was really what he was about.
Yes, but it's more about, it's a different approach. He's not making art to make a living, he's making art to build community and to have a conversation with the world and to do other sort of higher order things in a way.
Yes.
Have you, in the process of thinking about this legacy, I mean, is setting up a living legacy in his name that you and Ijeoma set out to do? How have you approached that, and how did he prepare you in some ways for continuing the legacy in his name in the way that he would have wanted it to be?
Yeah. He didn't leave any stone unturned to keep spreading his ideas, but it was most unintrusive, so you wouldn't even notice. It was after his demise I realized that he engaged with we four siblings quite differently. I think basically, depending on our characters or our interests, but at the same time, when we all came together, because we have two junior brothers also, I found out, surprisingly, because I was busy living my own life, basically, that everybody, and impacted on everybody, and everybody had the same basic idea to start with. So he started off with that, and he did a lot of that with so many people. That's why he had so much followership. You don't even realize when he gets under your skin. And thereafter, he was somebody that documented every single thought of his. He would write it down. He was very, very deliberate about leaving his ideas behind. And so we have a kind of blueprint, so to speak, of how to go. And basically, our job has been to see how it can engage with today. You understand what I'm saying? How we can continue spreading those ideas with today's technology, for instance, in today's world as it is, with all the changing landscape of global community, that kind of thing.
And at the same time, you have
to wrap our minds around that. Yes.
Yeah, and at the same time, you have this huge archive of material that he's collected and left behind, his writings, his poems, artworks, all sorts of things that part of the legacy project is to make those resources available to other people for research purposes or continuing to make them work in the way that And obviously that's now a kind of case of digitizing in a way that he didn't have the opportunity to do. So
No, he didn't. Yes.
what do you hope that the legacy project will create?
I hope that the legacy project will help to bring his ideas to wider audiences, younger people that and people that haven't heard of him, for instance, and even for those that have been working with him, see in what directions his ideas are pulling us, and see what new areas that it can take us to. It's like a journey of self discovery. It's like a never ending journey with Uche Okeke.
It is indeed. And on that journey, Ijeoma, your sister, was so key as your partner, and you must miss her so much. But I know that she would be so proud of how you are continuing to work.
The work I'm continuing is happily the work that myself and Ijeoma had put together. That's the thing about working with someone that gets it and someone that you're able to flow with. I'm only able to continue that work because we had got it to this point together. I just wonder what could have if she went earlier, but we worked so hard over, especially 2016 after the demise of our father, and we knew that we were heading in this direction, and we just kept working towards the direction. So it's only possible to be here because of the tremendous amount of work that Ijeoma has put in.
And it's great at this point to be on this journey with you, Salma, and to be beginning to share it, beginning to launch it on the site that is going to be its home. And every week we're going to be having more conversations, sort of bringing together community. And in this channel, we'll be having more conversations every Thursday throughout the month of August. And then we'll begin the very exciting collaboration project, which is also going to happen in this channel, where other artists, just as your dad used to do, will be able to literally collaborate with his work through a new kind of technology that didn't exist when he was there with generative AI. So we are tremendously looking forward to that, and we'll talk more about that to people in these channels and on our social media as we go along. And I think at this point, if you're ready, Salma, I'm ready to switch to the Hangout and enjoy conversing with our guests.
All right.
So Hangout, you just click on the channel, the voice channel below, the one that's called Stage, where we are now. And when you click on there, you'll be able to chat with us. Your mic will be open and you'll be able to chat with us. So I'm going to leave the stage now, and I will see you in the Hangout.